We as humans always have that one hobby we have a special connection with. It's something that relaxes our minds and nourishes our souls. For some, it could be reading or painting, and some might have a gateway through running or swimming. For me, it's always been hunting. I remember going on hunting trips for as long as I can remember. As a kid, I used to get overwhelmed with excitement just to hop into the woods with my dad and admire him as he shot down one prey after another. Even as a 36-year-old, my love for hunting remained intact until that one incident that happened a few months ago that altered my love for hunting forever. I still go hunting, but not as frequently as I used to. From what used to be an every-week excursion, hunting has become something which I would only turn to on holidays or sometimes weekends because no matter how hard I try, the flashbacks of what happened that day always come rushing back as soon as I step into the woods. It's hard to imagine doing what you're doing with the constant fear of being attacked. It was the 19th of December, and I was out hunting with my dad. It was a slow hunting trip, but I enjoyed seeing my dad at peace. He had been suffering from some coronary disease for a few years, and his job had been quite stressful. I felt happy to see him walking into the woods with relief and talking about how his younger days used to be. It was the best Christmas I could have ever asked for. The weather was also perfect that day. Heavy rain showers were expected that weekend, but the sky cleared up and was lovely. It seemed like this trip was bound to happen. A trip where Dad and I could escape the chaos of daily life and sit in the woods reminiscing about the good old days. But things went downhill quickly, and what I saw that day still haunts me. It was around 3 p.m. and we were about ready to pack up and call it a day. During the trip, I got a call from work. It seemed important because it was unlikely for the company to call any employees during the holiday. I left my dad to get the call and wanted to get done with it as soon as possible. I was still talking when I heard something move in the distance. I turned around to see if it was my dad, but there was nothing. Something rustled again. I hung up the call and followed the noise behind the trees. Then I saw something move on my side. I turned my head toward it, and what I saw next left me confused. At first glance, I thought it was another hunter because the eyes peering at me were human. It could have been a hunter, but I didn't understand why they behaved oddly and pried on me. Then something caught my eye, which made me believe that it was anything but human. Its nose was elongated and the ears were huge and pointed. What made me more sure was its body and legs, which resembled a coyote. The creature looked right into my eyes, and at that moment, something took over me. I wanted to look away, but it felt like its eyes were consuming me. I wanted to turn back and run as far as I could from this creature, but I stood there frozen at my spot, looking into its eyes. I got out of my trance when I heard my dad at my side. I looked over at him, and he looked surprised by how pale my face looked. I wanted to tell him everything that had happened, but first, I wanted to get out of this place. So I asked him to pack up and get in the car as soon as possible. For a second, he looked disappointed and wanted to argue about why I was messing up the plan, but the terrified look on my face convinced him to start packing up. Within a few minutes, we were heading out of the forest when I heard a screech from the same point where I saw the creature. My eyes widened as the screech sounded angry. It was as if the creature had missed its chance of consuming or taking over. My palms started getting sweaty as I thought of what could have happened if it wasn't for my dad to call me out of my trance. But mostly I was scared of what would happen if it came back for me again. We walked up to the car as fast as we could. I told my dad to drive fast. He nodded, but we couldn't go overboard due to the steep terrain. Then when we were on the highway, I told my dad what I had seen. I described what the creature looked like and how his eyes seemed to have a hypnotizing power. I was expecting my dad to tell me it was some kind of rare animal, but he just sat quietly and listened to me. Then he asked me to talk to my uncle about it. I was a little confused as to what my uncle, who I hadn't seen in months, would have to do with this. As far as I knew, he wasn't even a fan of hunting, but what he said next made shivers run down my spine. He told me about how he and my uncle went hunting when they were younger, and my uncle had an encounter with the same creature I saw today. He tried explaining it to everyone, but no one believed him and shrugged it off. But now that I saw the same thing, my dad believed in my uncle. I felt pity for my uncle and how no one believed him. I decided to visit him the next day. It was a long drive, but I knew he needed to talk about the fear that he had been holding on to for all these years. I talked to him in detail about what I saw. I explained everything from the frightening screech to the coyote-like body, and he said that he had seen and heard the same thing. He also explained how he felt like he was being hypnotized by it and couldn't look away. I showed him on the map where it had happened, and as soon as he looked at it, his eyes went wide, and there was an unknown sense of fear on his face. Trembling, he told me this was exactly where he had seen the creature. I gave my uncle a hug, and he teared up a bit in my arms. I just let him stay like that for a while because I couldn't even imagine how hard it had been for him to have everyone tell him he was probably exaggerating or making it all up. I don't know what conclusion to make out of it. I'm still terrified by what I saw that day. It feels like the creature is after our family or something. It had been months since that accident, and I couldn't sleep properly for the first few days, because every time I closed my eyes, I would be back at the same spot with the same human-like eyes staring deep into my soul. I would hear the same screech repeatedly, and every time it sounded angrier than before. I still go hunting sometimes, but it's lost its essence. I no longer feel excited about getting into the woods. Instead, there's this lingering fear of coming into contact with that deadly creature again. And if that happens, I'm not sure I can make it out safely. I asked my uncle what he thought the creature was, and he says it could be a skinwalker. He tried convincing me to go back and try and catch it, but there's no way I'll ever be stepping into that place again. The way it consumed me at that moment proves that there's no way we can catch it. But I am sure that it isn't an animal from the earth, and if there's anything that could tame it,